Hi everyone and welcome to Inside the Naval Postgraduate School. I'm your host Alan Richmond from Monterey, California, the nation's premier national security research university. Our first segment opens with Admiral Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is an NPS alumnus and recently visited our campus to talk with our students. Well, Admiral Mullen, welcome to NPS, welcome home, and to Inside NPS on the Pentagon Channel. It's always a pleasure to see you, sir. The last time you were here, you were inducted into the NPS Hall of Fame, and today you're speaking to our students. And I'm just wondering, can you tell us what is your message?
Well, I'm going to talk to them today about the priorities that I see as chairman, which focus first of all on the broader Middle East stability there, the wars that we're in, the challenges that we have. Secondly, the health of our force. Actually, my wife and I spent all day yesterday up at Fort Lewis, Washington, where some 18,000 soldiers are returning from the wars this year, and the real challenges that we have to meet the needs of the soldiers who've been under this enormous pressure and stress and been incredibly successful, as well as their families who've endured that same stress and challenge. And that group certainly represents the challenge that we have principally in the Marine Corps and the Army, because the ground forces have absorbed the brunt of the requirements of these wars. So how we do that and handle the health of our force, the challenges that are there, has a great deal to do not with just succeeding in the wars we're in, but also the future of our military. And then lastly, the third priority is to talk about the rest of the world. And there's a lot going on in other parts of the world as well. I recently had a trip out to Korea tied to the sinking of the Corvette by the North Koreans as an example. It's a critical part of the world that needs to be stable, that we are highly invested in, economically tied to, and when you have a rising China that have been somewhat opaque in their intentions, the challenges are significant there as well. So I'll talk a little bit about all those priorities and then get to what is the most important part, which is their questions and answers, which guides me oftentimes in other directions, and I learn a lot from them, and I try to give them as much as I know on any given subject.
I know family is important, and we've talked about that in the past, but can you tell us what role do families play in the military's life?
Well, again, I'm here with my wife. We've been a Navy family for over 40 years, and family support has always been critical in military service. I've just seen it grow to a level that is unprecedented since these wars started, and it's actually very simple for me. We would be unable to carry out our missions without the incredible support that we've had from our families. And I believe the family readiness issue is directly tied to our military readiness, not just now, but in the future, and in ways that we really haven't thought through in the past. So focusing on that, investing in that, making sure that our families are every bit as ready to handle the challenges of our missions as our military members is a real priority for both myself and my wife.
How would you compare today's military of the United States against those around the world?
Well, when I think about our militaries today, and I think about it actually as I do our country, we've moved well beyond any single military or any single country doing it alone. We've got to have partners in the future. As I look at the war in Afghanistan right now, there are 46 countries who have military personnel supporting the efforts in Afghanistan. That's a huge statement of support, not just military support, but political support, and proper, from my perspective, prioritization of the dangers that exist in that part of the world. And I think it's representative of so many other challenges that we have that we just can't do it alone. So it's not size so much anymore, because some of those countries have units as small as 50 or 60 people, and they still make a big difference. Their flag makes a big difference. And so I see that globally in many, many ways. So I think overall our military is in good shape. We clearly are leading edge in many areas. I'm concerned with the growth, the military growth in other parts of the world, and we've got to be able to match that and understand it. It's the best military in the 40-plus years that I've ever been associated with. It's a real privilege to serve today because they are our military and they're made up of our young people. I'm fond of saying the average age in a unit's in the early 20s, and they truly are extraordinary. So we're in good shape, but I don't take that for granted. We've got to focus on being the right military for the future as well.
Well, Secretary Gates just announced some big potential cutbacks in military spending. I'm wondering if you can give us your perspective.
Well, I think it's a really critical undertaking that he's laid out. I have a fairly significant background in budgeting and programming. We are programmed in the next few years for 1% growth, and that's while many other agencies in our government are flatlined. Secretary Gates and I see a requirement for really 2 to 3% growth to meet the military needs that we have, the national priorities that we have from a national security standpoint. And so the whole thrust of what Secretary talked about yesterday was to move overhead from the overhead column into the warfighting column, modernization, personnel, and future force structure. And we've got to do that. And we've got to do that to meet the missions. And we think, actually, I've spent a lot of time on this with him, and the initiatives that he laid out and others which will follow, we think it's doable. That it will be challenging, I think, is indicative of just the response that you read about today in the press. But I really think it's a critical undertaking and that we must succeed in it in order to continue to grow the military to meet the needs that we're being asked to fill right now.
Well, you know, we're always looking for new students here at the Naval Postgraduate School, and having been an alumnus, I'm wondering what advice would you give to someone contemplating coming to NPS?
Well, since I came in 1968, my first small division on a destroyer, one of the messages that those 10 or 12 young sailors sent me is they came into the Navy so they could improve themselves. And they do that by many ways, life experience being one, seeing the world. But very important in their view was training as much as they could get and education as much as they could get. And that continues to be the case from my perspective right through today, even more so in a world that demands the higher level of education almost as an entree to whatever career you're in. And it also, in and of itself, broadens individuals, gives them skills and ways to think that they may not have had. And when I talk to audiences about the future of our military, I always talk about change. And I'll do a little bit that today. But I think all of us are going to have to continue to change in how we educate and how we train and what we study and where we go with respect to that. And we have to keep pace with the world in terms of what's going on globally. The whole economic underpinning for the world, the financial crisis we're in right now, military members need to understand that because we are directly linked to economic stability. And when you don't have it and standards of living are low and you're in a part of the world where there are the haves and the have-nots, usually instability is fomenting or going to be fomented, and that involves us. So I think we just have to broaden our horizons with respect to education now and in the future, and I think it will continue to play a vital part of everything we're doing.
I'm wondering about the critical thinking skills that you've talked about that you learned when you were a student here at NPS. What kind of an impact did they have in your life and your career?
Well, it was actually a long time between my undergraduate education and my master's degree education here, upwards of 15 years. And I had a level of maturity and found out what a difference made that there was when you, in having great professors, but also when you really applied yourself. And as I look back at my undergraduate days, I didn't apply myself as well as I would like to have in retrospect. But at the same time, I did here, and it was the engagement, the intellectual engagement. It was the skills that I was forced to really sharpen in order to succeed in a very difficult curriculum. While I enjoy math and science and engineering, I was in operations research. And the reason I enjoyed that in particular because it was application to real world problems. So I was able to take my education and apply it to the things that were important to me from a career standpoint. As is, I think, the case in many people's lives, institutions which make a big difference in your life, whether it was your high school, obviously your family, Annapolis for me, and the other one has been the postgraduate school. Made a huge difference in my life and my career. And one of the reasons I come back here is to make sure everything's going okay with respect to the PG school, and it's exceptionally well led, but also to give back because this institution gave me so much.
Well, NPS is certainly known for its cutting-edge research, and I'm just wondering, what is your opinion of the ongoing research here at NPS in support of the warfighter?
Well, I think more and more so, making sure we're focused on the right technologies. Part of what Secretary Gates will talk about in some detail in this recent initiative is the need to produce programs that are underpinned with new technologies much more rapidly and at a much reduced cost. And that will require a very steady underpinning of research, focused on the right things in terms of the kinds of warfighting areas in particular that we'll be involved in the future. So it's critical. What I worry about when we put pressure on the budget is oftentimes it's R&D that gets hit very strongly. That doesn't mean that R&D doesn't have its overhead, because it does. S&T has its overhead as well, and we've got to get that right. The message is we've got to spend every dollar responsibly, but we have to be very careful about the focus of both S&T and R&D in terms of going where we want to go. And NPS has done a great job with respect to that. It's a wonderful environment in which to pursue the kinds of future that are tied to new horizons because of the academic environment, because of the attachment that the institution has to so many R&D centers throughout the country, and individuals who do this for a living. And so it's a great center in that regard. And I've been very, very happy with where NPS has been and look to more of the same for the future.
Well, Admiral Mullen, it's always a pleasure to see you and welcome you home to NPS. And thanks for taking time to appear with us here on Inside NPS on the Pentagon Channel. Good to see you.
Well, it's great to be with you.
Coming up after this break, we'll look at new battlefield technology on the medical front, as well as autonomous vehicles and how they're supporting the warfighter. Stay tuned. New technologies are being developed all the time here at the Naval Postgraduate School, especially those that support the warfighter. Recently, we had the opportunity to visit with Dr. Alex Bordetsky about a new medical treatment for casualties on the front lines.
We started battlefield medical networking experimentation upon the request from the Air Force Special Operations Chief Surgeon, when they wanted to explore how can we take benefit of network-controlled unmanned systems to assist medic in delivering medication to the casualty site under fire or otherwise in the hazardous conditions. So we've structured first experiments by putting the unmanned aerial vehicle on the mesh network, dropping off the medication to the casualty site when we faced the barrier in the accuracy of that process. So we switched to the new mode of activating emerging nanotechnology devices, putting it together with the MIT Institute for Soldier Nanotechnology, so that unmanned aerial vehicle above the casualty site activates and injects much needed medication. So what you're going to see in the fragment today is the next step in our attempts of bringing robotics into support of remote medical assistance to the casualty. So this is first time we've implemented unmanned ground vehicles to augment aerial delivery or activation or injection of medicine to assist the casualty. In the previous attempts, we used helicopter or similar unmanned aerial vehicle as a mesh networking node controlled by the medic 100 miles away to descend to the casualty, activate the device like the one you see, to deliver uninvasively medication to the casualty. So we are still lacking casualty in getting close enough. Or if we need to deliver the blood-stopping patch right next to the person, we have to be more accurate. And that's how ground robots could help us in that project. So the particular part of the experiment put together by my colleague Eugene Burakov was to actually take small unmanned ground vehicle, bring the medication, all done automatically by converting the commands done by medic through the common operational picture into the waypoints of unmanned ground vehicle. Some of the major accomplishments of this experiment is that we proved that it's feasible. The whole process for which Eugene Burakov put together ground robots and made them self-oriented works so well that we can get as close as 1 foot, even closer to the casualty side for delivering either injection or medication or medical or blood-stopping patch for that matter.
Stay tuned for more of Inside the Naval Postgraduate School in just a moment. ScanEagle is a low-cost, long-endurance unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV. It entered service with the U.S. Navy in 2005. In addition to the United States military, the Australian Army also operates ScanEagle. As well, the Canadian government announced in August of 2008 that they would lease the ScanEagle for use for their military operations in Afghanistan. It needs no airfield for deployment. Instead, it's launched using this pneumatic launcher, and it's recovered by a skyhook retrieval system. We had a chance to see it in action in the field. Well, we're participating at Camp Roberts in one of the TNT exercises and just witnessed the launch of the ScanEagle. And here to tell us a little bit more about the ScanEagle is Patrick Burke. Patrick, this is quite a useful tool for the warfighter, isn't it?
Actually, it's a fantastic tool. I've been able to witness it for the better part of the last 3 years now in 3 separate deployments operating ScanEagle, 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. It has several great characteristics that have made it really fantastic for supporting the war effort over there. Number one is it is a runway independent system. As you saw with our launcher and our recovery system being the skyhook, we only need a small field or a small opening in a fob, for example, to launch and recover aircraft, and we can do that at a pretty significant rate. Another one is its endurance. We can put it full of fuel. It only runs on 5 liters of fuel, and we can get a combat time of 16 to 20 hours, depending on how we configure it. So that is a long time to loiter over any target, which makes it sufficient for doing 24-hour operations. There's 2 configurations, an EO, an electronic optical camera, and an infrared. So we can launch an aircraft, for example, at 0400 with a EO, a digital camera for the day, fly it to a target where there's already an infrared, park it right on top, move the other one down, slide it right on, and keep 24/7 coverage because we have the endurance to do so. The camera system is fantastic. We're able to use an object tracker and drop targets to give real-time data coordinates back to anybody who uses it. And we also have several systems with forward eyes and forward ground control stations to make hub and spoke, and even put antennas and receivers on vehicles like a Humvee or a MRAP to get live video down to the troops on the ground. It really is a fantastic system. I know it's been proven because it's been flying for I'm brain farting amount of hours. I believe it's 20,000 or 30,000 combat hours over the last several years, and it's only increasing in volume over there. It's a great system, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Now, how many are flying right now? How many are in service? And what is the new technology that you're looking toward for the next generation?
As for the number of aircraft flying, I can tell you offhand that I know that there is over a dozen sites, land and on sea, because it's also a system. Because we're not runway independent, we can put the skyhook and the launcher on the back end of a naval vessel, for example, fire it out into the wind, then likewise swing the skyhook into the wind and catch it off a Navy ship. So there's at least a dozen different sites, varying in size. Some of them only flying 6 to 10 hours a day. Some of them flying upwards of 3,000 hours a month, with 5+ aircraft up at any given time going out to hubs and spokes in different areas.
Well, social networking is something we're all involved with these days, but there are some key issues you should be aware of and some security issues. Recently, we had a chance to address that topic with NPS Professor Simpson Garfinkel.
What we're seeing is that a large number of DoD personnel are participating in social networks. Somewhere between 1/2 and 2/3 of all DoD personnel appear to have a Facebook page. Somewhere between 1/4 and 1/8 of DoD personnel have LinkedIn websites. Many of them have MySpace accounts. And what we're seeing is that it's very easy to identify a person's DoD affiliation from the postings that they do online. We've seen people are posing in their uniforms on their social network websites. We've seen pages belonging to a recruiter, and he has friended everybody that he has recruited. We have seen many cases in which it's possible to infer information about troop movements or personnel issues through an analysis of the social media websites. One of the concerns that we have is that people are trusting the infrastructure of services like Facebook and MySpace, and we think that trust is misplaced. There's a lot of information that they put on these websites that they don't want to be made generally available, but they don't set their privacy settings appropriately. We're finding that even if you do set your privacy settings appropriately, it's possible for that information to leak out, maybe through a friend's account. There may be people in your network who are not who they claim to be. And it's important for people, for the warfighters, to remember that we are at war and that this is a tool that can be used to target us. This is a tool that can be used against our interests. People frequently don't realize the way it's possible to assemble information from different locations to create a composite. So they'll try to put some information on one website and some information on another site, like some information on Facebook and some information on LinkedIn, without realizing just how easy it is to assemble that all into a whole. Another thing that we see is that people think that the information that they post will have a very limited use, and that they're concerned, they feel violated when information that they make available in one context is used in another context. But once the information is put into the system, there's really no way to control it. There's a lot of deception happening on Facebook. There are people who run applications, and the developers of those applications then have access to all the private information that the users of the applications have. I know of one company that has developed applications for Facebook and has gotten them to be widely used, and uses those applications to data mine information about Facebook users. Once you let somebody into the social network, they have access to personal information that you might not want them to. I think DoD personnel are very trusting of these services, and they're trusting of them because they see it as a personal endeavor, not as a professional endeavor. I think, unfortunately, it's unrealistic to ask people to completely abstain. One of the main uses, I think, of services like Facebook is to allow communications for families between people in the field and people at home. We've seen support systems for spouses of military personnel, and those support can be very, very useful, but useful for morale. But we need to understand that all of these systems are potentially being monitored by our adversary, and so it's important to be sensitive about what information is invested into them.
Allie Rogers is the Director of Faculty Development here at the Naval Postgraduate School and offers us an examination of learning from the student's perspective. Now, this is the first in a series that will be premiered next month right here on Inside NPS.
The Classroom Connections video project is actually a two-part volume that looks at two important questions that have great impact on what we do educationally. The questions being, what does it mean to teach something well, and what does it mean to learn something well? What's interesting about these questions is that they have many answers and that the answers change over time. And as you're aware, NPS is completing a multi-year reaccreditation process with WASC, and in that process of self-study, we have reflected upon what does it mean to teach well and what does it mean to learn well. The student perspective segment is kind of a neat piece because it gives us an upfront look at what our students make of their learning experience, talking a little bit about where they come from, what goals they bring to this learning environment, and basically the value they place on their education here at NPS. So Classroom Connections it gives the voice of the student, which is an important indicator in our overall effectiveness, and we hope to use that in WASC.
It's actually been a really nice chance to come and sort of assess actually a lot of what I saw in the joint and interagency processes in the context of a lot of the theories that we learn and sort of the broader perspective on some world issues. You know, you do your day-to-day job and can tend to get very narrow-focused and very much in-depth, and it's easy to sort of lose context. And so it's really been a chance to kind of process a lot of those experiences and try and bin them in terms of not just theory, but also try to learning about sort of the broader context that they all sit in.
Stay tuned for part 2 and more of student perspectives from NPS on Inside NPS next month. Well, that's it for this edition of Inside the Naval Postgraduate School from the nation's premier National Security Research University in Monterey, California. I'm your host, Alan Richmond. We'll see you next time right here on Inside NPS on the Pentagon Channel.